Welcome to my channel. This is Bruce the Boss Resurrected, and the topic of today is the push or agenda to make the jab mandatory one way or another. But before we get into that, I want to remind those who are subscribed and or who are thinking of subscribing to my channel, you may have heard and or know that my previous channel was just nuked 2 weeks ago, just for simply talking about the topic that I'm about to talk about today. And so just in case if that happens, and if you no longer see me on YouTube when looking for my videos, go ahead and follow me on Twitter. I'm also starting to upload my videos on Rumble as a backup. So if anything does happen, you can find me on there to see of any new updates and to see if I was able to create a new channel. Another thing is, you may have noticed that I am currently wearing a cycling jersey. It's because I do plan on going out to do about maybe 40-45 miles, possibly 50, cycling this afternoon since I get done with this video. So I am participating in the Multiple Sclerosis Society charity bike ride this September, 100-mile bike ride, and so I am training and preparing for it. I am saying this because if you would like to donate to my fundraising page, go ahead and do so. Your donations will go a long way in fighting the battle of multiple sclerosis and MS, and helping those who do have MS live their best life possible. Now on to the topic. If you haven't heard, on CNN there was a video and or discussion as it pertains to making the jab as mandated as possible. If they can't do it legislatively, they'll find other ways of doing it. Listen to the clip.
This really depends on what it is that we do at this point. So now we have this Delta variant that is much more contagious. Because it's more contagious, it's going to be even harder for us to reach herd immunity. We're going to have to vaccinate an even higher proportion of people to get there. What happens then if we end up having another variant developing that's even more contagious, that could cause more disease, that could evade the protection of our immune system? And so how quickly we get this under control and which way we go depends on what we do now when it comes to vaccination, to overcoming disinformation. And what we really need to do at this point is to make vaccination the easy choice. It needs to be hard for people to remain unvaccinated. Right now, it's kind of the opposite. It's fine. I mean, it's easy if you're unvaccinated. You can do everything you want to do anyway. But at some point, these mandates by workplaces, by schools, I think it will be important to say, hey, you can opt out, but if you want to opt out, you have to sign these forms. You have to get twice weekly testing. Basically, we need to make getting vaccinated the easy choice. That is what it's going to take for us to actually end the pandemic.
All right, Dr. Leana Wen, Max Boot.
So I can't even say that they're saying the quiet things out loud anymore. I think it's no longer quiet, but rather they are just being bold because they feel as though they're unchallenged. They own, and when I say they, I mean this far left progressive agenda, far left to distinguish from those who are just classically and or basic left leaning. There seems to be an agenda, all part of Agenda 2030 as well, that is pushing towards this goal of getting everyone jabbed, for instance, and or controlling a narrative as it pertains to everything going on. And they feel bold enough because they control all measures of institutions in the society. They control the educational system and that indoctrination that goes on through from K through 12. And then if you go on even further through the majority of these universities, the indoctrination continues to the point where if you have another view, we have thousands, tens of thousands of individuals, college students coming forward who do hold more conservative values and or ideas backed with a lot of facts and their own evidence, who have come out and said they feel pressured to change their point of view, change their perspective, and or change their arguments in order just to get a passing grade. So they own the university and the academia. They own the media, both mainstream legacy media as well as social media. They control the information you see. They control the information that you mostly consume. Again, case in point with the mass levels of censorship, both in legacy media and social media, in terms of what you're able to find and or see and not allowed to see. And now they control most of the government, at least legislatively in Washington, D.C. on a federal level. Definitely not on the state level in terms of governor mansions and who's in charge on the state level there. But I digress. Now Dr. Leana Wen there, it's safe to say she is a CNN contributor at this point, because this is not the first time she's made an appearance on CNN and espousing the same thing. In fact, previously she made the same argument prior to most of these states opening back up, trying to pressure a lot of those states, particularly red states, in order to get them to stay closed unless if individuals get the jab. Problem is, a lot of those governors, such as my own Governor Greg Abbott, as well as Governor DeSantis of Florida, have massively pushed back and said, nope, we are opening up 100% regardless of the jab percentage or rate in our state. We will encourage to push it, but we're still going to open up. And so the genie's already out of the bottle. The toothpaste is out of the tube. She knows we can't put it back in. There's no turning back from the state and legal level. So now she is putting or trying to encourage an agenda to say, all right, well, let's go back to the areas of industry where we do control. We may not control these states now, but we do control, again, academia, and then they also control the workplace, as a lot of these major corporations do lean far left and or have been known to bow to the political whim of the far left, as we've seen with Toyota and their fundraising and or contributions to those in the GOP who support a particular movement and or event that will go unnamed. She's trying to say, let's make life as much of a hell for those who choose not to get the jab. Now, last I recall, I thought we lived in the land of the free, where you were free to make a choice. Well, now there seems to be an agenda being spoken about, whether or not if it actually happens, about making sure that if you do choose a certain path, your life will be hell. Therefore, making that choice no longer a bearable choice for one to want to have to make. All right. Now, I think that we've gotten to the point where there is becoming, as Dr. Fauci once said, maybe two Americas. Those who get the jab and those who do not get the jab. And those who do not get the jab will be treated like secondhand citizens who can be mistreated and or segregated. And again, as Dr. Wen suggested, making their life a living hell until they submit otherwise. And it should never really be about that. It should always be freedom of choice and respecting said choice and having a certain level of risk assessment to one's life and decision making, which should always be the case. If someone decides to, and it shouldn't be a matter of if someone decides to, you should always consult with your physician, with your medical doctor who knows your history, knows your biology, knows what works best for you, what it is you're going through. You should always consult with them first, bottom line. But if after that consultation and or you've made an informed and educated decision and assumed the necessary risks, you should be free to make that decision. So if you do choose at the end of the day to get jabbed, I will support that 100%, and everyone else should and respect that decision. If you choose not to get the jab, also should be respected. Your life should not be made a living hell for choosing one way or another. All right. And the argument some will point out and say, well, it's no longer a matter of your body, your choice, if what your decision does affect someone else. And I can agree to that to an extent, i.e., you should not be free to drive drunk on the road because your action will endanger someone else who never signed up for that. And there have been tens of thousands of automobile deaths and accidents every single year in this country as a result of drunk driving. I understand wanting to legislate that, but when it comes to this situation, it doesn't really hold up as much water because, for one thing, there seems to have been a very successful agenda that seems to have swept many people, unfortunately, on the left side of the aisle, more so, and that is to make you afraid of your fellow human being, your fellow man. You are assuming that everyone else around you is a potential threat, therefore keeping you separated from one another, which is the ultimate goal, to keep people from the left and the right, for instance, and libertarians and anarchists apart. Which, by the way, if you confuse me with right-leaning, that is a false assumption. I am very much the true independent that does lean anarchist/libertarian more so than not. But I do see that there is a struggle to keep all sides of the political spectrum apart. But this pandemic has definitely made sure that individuals are afraid of one another. They are automatically assuming that the other person is a threat unless if they see them virtue signaling with something over their face, for instance. And so you're automatically assuming that the other person, for instance, is a risk to you, which is wrong, because it is just that, for instance, an assumption. There is a strong possibility that most people you see walking around like this are not at all sick and or infected. So you shouldn't make any false assumptions about another individual. But aside from that, like, okay, if a person decides not to, it doesn't mean that they are sick. If they don't get the jab, it doesn't mean that they are currently sick, that they're carriers and or asymptomatic. They can just be normal individuals, especially if they are not displaying any symptoms. But let's say if they choose not to get it and they do get it, they do contract it, because it is highly contagious disease, as most Ronas are, okay? If someone else who also chose not to get the jab gets infected, it's because they assumed that risk. They took it upon themselves. Are they not free to do that? Another thing, or another scenario, is if an individual does not get the jab, in some scenario contracts it. If the other individual that you're so worried about does get the jab themselves, what is there to be afraid of? Because the jab is 95% effective in not only preventing infection, but if they do get infected, at beating it successfully with very mild, at worst mild symptoms. In cases like some of those Yankee players earlier this year and Bill Maher, they'll get it and be asymptomatic. It is extremely successful at preventing hospitalizations and or death. Very successful, not a cure though. But again, by getting the jab, doesn't it protect you from those who do not get the jab? And by saying, well, no, it still doesn't, you're defeating your whole argument for the purpose of getting the jab. Because if getting the jab is a great form of protection, by still being equally afraid whether or not you still get the jab, proves or sets to the argument, it can make the case that maybe the jab isn't as successful as you think it is, when in fact it really is highly effective. And then let's not also forget the argument of who is truly affected by this demographic, because another argument being made is try saying that to the 600,000 dead Americans. My response back would be, with great condolences to those who lost someone, let's look at who made up that 600,000. And if I were to tell you that of that 600,000, the average age was 81, and here's why that's important. For one thing, to this day still, the average age of death for a male in the United States is 77, and I believe females is somewhere around the early to mid 80s. Therefore, if the average age of those 600,000 is 81, if anyone knows math, in order to get to an average age of 81, it means the overwhelming majority of people fell within that age span, probably a little bit higher, with individuals falling within my age group or demographic being of such an extreme minority. It's so rare. It's as rare as adverse effects to getting the jab. It's extremely low in order to get, for those who are in their 40s, 30s, 40s and under of that 600,000, in order to get to an average age of 81, have to be of such an extreme minority and special circumstances or case. So 81 tells me that those who are already likely going to die, unfortunately, died of this virus, as opposed to one of the other millions of other things that will otherwise kill someone in their 80s, such as heart disease, cardiovascular issues, stroke, accidents, and or natural disaster. All right, that's what it's one telling me, that those mostly affected are the elderly. So long as we minimize our risk and or contact with the elderly, or so long as we do what we can to protect those elderly, we're cool. Don't look at someone like me as being the same as someone who is in their 70s or 80s. The other thing too then is, of the others who weren't of that age group, were they or were they not massively overweight and or morbidly obese? Because all of the studies seem to show that 80% were just that. as well as other pre-existing conditions like cardiovascular issues, heart issues, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, other comorbidities. So that's another conversation to have, that so long as those people who are truly at risk get the jab, we should be fine. But bottom line is we should not be mandating this thing. It's a very dangerous agenda that's being pushed by making it nearly impossible to go to school or to go to work without getting the jab. Is not a direction we want to be taken down. We need to be aware of this and keep having these conversations and put these employers on blast, which at this point, I don't think many employers are willing to really risk it, because they're already having such a hard time finding people willing to work because of the policies that have made it so much easier for individuals to stay at home and collect unemployment than putting themselves back out there to work. So the leverage is no longer really there as much with many of these employers. But that's the conversation. That's the video. This is Bruce the Boss Resurrected. If you like this video, please go ahead and subscribe to this channel, like this video, comment on this video. This interactions go a long way with keeping the discussion out there. Again, the mandate seems to be in effect, or at least the agenda to make it a mandate seems to be in effect. This is Bruce the Boss Resurrected, and I'm out. Peace.